So Simple tutorial. Good morning students. Welcome to SST So Simple tutorial. In the previous class we had read India-China relations. Today we will discuss the next topic, Japan as an emerging power. Let us first see the location of Japan. Japan is a small country in Eastern Asia. It lies to the east of the Sea of Japan, North Korea, China, South Korea and Russia, stretching from the Sea of Okhotsk in the north to the East China Sea and Taiwan in the south. It is surrounded by sea from all sides. It shares its maritime borders with People's Republic of China, North Korea, South Korea, the Philippines, Russia, Mariana Islands of the US and Taiwan. If you see, Japan is basically an archipelago. There are over 14,000 islands, out of which only 430 are inhabited. The four main islands are Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku and Kyushu. Its total area is 3,77,975 km square. More than two-thirds of Japan is mountainous. The group of islands are split into two halves by a long stretch of mountains. The eastern half faces the Pacific Ocean, the opposite side faces to the Sea of Japan. It is in the plains and mountain basins that most of the population is concentrated. That means most cities, farms and people are squeezed into one-third of Japan's total land. The islands of Japan are situated on the ring of fire, so they suffer from frequent earthquakes. More than 1,000 earthquakes hit Japan every year. There are 108 active volcanoes, so they suffer from volcanic activities also. Japan has very few natural resources and import most of its raw materials. The land of Japan is not fit for cultivation, and hence it has to import a large quantity of food grain from other countries. There is also great shortage of minerals for industrial development in Japan, and Japan imports most of its raw materials. Let us see a brief history of Japan. In 1868, Emperor Meiji dismissed the shogun and assumed control. Under Meiji, Japan rapidly industrialized and established strong army and navy. The beginning of the 20th century was the age of imperialism. Every country of the world was trying to expand its territory. In Asia, both Russia and Japan were heading towards imperialism. Therefore, clash between them was inevitable. It was in this period that Japan became a world power through her victories in Sino-Japanese War and Russo-Japanese War. The first Sino-Japanese War between Japan and China in 1894-95 marked the emergence of Japan as a major world power. In the Russo-Japanese War in 1904-05, Japan defeated Russia. In 1910, Korea was annexed. In 1931, Japanese army had seized Manchuria. Japan entered in Second World War and seized control of French Indochina in 1940. In 1941, Japan occupied Hong Kong. In 1942, Japan occupied Philippines, Dutch Indochina, Malaya, Singapore, Thailand and reached up to Burma. Do you know? In 1942, the Japanese had occupied the Andaman and Nicobar Islands also. They fought with the Allied forces in Imphal, the capital of Manipur, in 1944 and were about to invade India, but that did not happen. You can see the extent of Japanese occupation here. Anyways, finally the dropping of atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended the war and Japan had to surrender. So until her defeat in Second World War, Japan was clearly one of the most powerful countries both economically and militarily. Japan was a devastated country at the time of its surrender. Major part of Tokyo and many cities had been turned to ashes. But after the defeat, the Japanese people had to start fresh since everything they had built during the war were destroyed by the war. Japan was occupied by the US forces after her defeat in the war. A new constitution was prepared which introduced a democratic parliamentary form of government and universal adult franchise. The institution of monarchy was retained, but the emperor was divested of powers and was made just a symbol of state. A new constitution renounced war as a national policy. As per Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat of the use of force as means of settling international disputes. Security of Japan rested on the US. However, Japan was allowed to keep a self-defense force. A number of reforms were initiated in the political system of Japan and society which laid the foundations of the post-war development of Japan. First was human resource development through education. They overhauled the education policy. The education system was reformed and its misuse for inculcating militaristic values were prevented. All teaching and research were focused on peaceful purpose. Much of the reform was focused on conditioning students to accept democratic, liberal and egalitarian ideals. Textbooks were changed. Then they carried out land reforms. The powers of big landlords were broken. These landlords owned large arable lands which they rented to the tenant farmers. The landlords were forced to sell their land holdings. The government bought these lands and distributed to the tenant farmers. This broke the class structure based on landholding in the society. The Korean War that began in the 1950 also benefited Japan. The US fought this war from Japan itself because US was already stationed there. Japan became the base and all orders for goods and services were assigned to Japanese suppliers. So all supplies used to go from Japan. Thus, Japan benefited from the war, although indirectly. Since Japan had few natural resources, it depends on massive imports of raw materials. So it must export to pay for its imports. Consequently, Japan paid her attention towards industries and trade. The industrial policy they adopted promoted industrial development and use of new technology. Rather than producing a broad range of goods, the Japanese selected a few areas in which they could develop high quality goods to produce in vast quantities at competitive prices. For example, camera industry, which since the 1960s has been dominated by Japan. Today, manufacturing is Japan's real strength. They import raw materials and process them to make finished goods, which are sold domestically or exported. Japan experienced a sustained economic growth. You can see the economic growth rate between 1950 to 1973. Japan has made tremendous advances in technology, which has become her main asset. In many fields of manufacturing requiring high technology, Japan has surpassed every other country in the world. It is the first country in Asia where modern science and technology have developed to such a great extent. Japanese have the reputation for making high technology products. Japanese goods command great respect in the market. Japanese brands like Toyota, Sony, Fujifilm, and Panasonic are famous across the globe. This is the result of intellect and hard work of Japanese people. One of the most promising fields for future economic growth is robotics, in which Japanese technology leads the world. Japan had focused on the development of robotics since the 1970s. Japan had strong research networks in universities and industries. 7 out of 10 world's leading robotic companies are housed in Japan. Japan is number 1 industrial robo manufacturer, delivering 45% of the global supply. Asimo is a humanoid robot. Humanoid means its appearance and character resemble that of a human. That means it can run, dance, hop, and kick a football. It was created by Honda in 2000 to be a helper to people. It is displayed in Mirakan Museum in Tokyo. Asimo has retired in March 2022. Let us see the economic might of Japan now. In 2017, it is the third largest economy in the world. Its GDP is $5.08 trillion. As one of the economic giants in the world today, Japan is closely allied with its most advanced economies of the West in her economic relations. Japan has a security alliance with the United States since 1951. Japan became a member of OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, since 1964. Japan is a member of G7 and the only Asian member. G7 is the group of 7 leading economies of the world, which includes USA, UK, Canada, Italy, France, Germany, Japan, as well as EU. Although Japan's military expenditure is only 1% of its GDP, Japan was placed at 10th position in 2022 on global military spending. As far as contribution to United Nations is concerned, it is the second largest contributor to the regular budget of the UN, second only to US. It contributes almost 10% of the total budget. The growth of Japan reminds me of the mythological creature called Phoenix. This is Phoenix. It is said to have magical powers. It rises from the ashes. Prior to Second World War, Japan was a power. The Second World War turned it into ashes, but Japan rose from its ashes to emerge as a great power again. India is the largest recipient of the Japanese aid. Japan is building the bullet train from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. Japan has also recently signed a loan agreement with Government of India for Patna Metro Rail project. Similarly, there are a number of other projects which are going on with the Japanese aid. Japan is the 5th largest investor in India, with a total investment estimated at about $36.2 billion in 2021. There are 114 Japanese companies operating across the country. India holds Malabar naval exercise with Japan every year. Australia and America also participate in it. This is in brief, my dear students, the success story of Japan as an emerging power. Let me stop here. I hope you have understood the lesson well. In the next class, we will read about South Korea. Till then, keep reading and have a nice time. Thank you.